Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. In this video, I would like to share some of the decks in my collection that I find that I am most attracted to working with during autumn. So for folks who don't know this, you will know this, I think, if you follow me on Instagram or if you have for a while. Every change of season, I change up my tarot reading table with different fabrics and a couple of different things that remind me of each season to give it a bit of a seasonal feel. You know, the vast majority of things actually stay the same, but I do have sets of cloths for my reading table and my altar that match, one each for each of the 4 seasons. So pretty recently on the fall equinox, I changed over my space and got out the fall fabric, which is, oranges and dark browns in a print. And when I was doing that, I thought that I would get out some decks that I most enjoy working with at this season and have those decks out across the top of my reading table so that they would be right there for me to reach for when I do readings for myself. This isn't something I actually normally do, keep a whole bunch of decks in a row on my table, but I thought it would be something to try. I know I've seen other friends who arrange their table in this way, and I thought that it would lead me to work with more variety of decks. So I thought since I had done that, I would bring the decks downstairs and make a video to share the decks that I selected as my autumnal decks. These are not the only decks that I will be working with this season by any means. There are several others that I'm working with for particular projects, working through particular books and things like this. But these are decks that really feel autumnal to me in my collection, so I thought I would share those with you. And I've picked 1 Lenormand, 2 Oracle, and 4 Tarot, so 7 decks total. For the Lenormand, and I don't actually have a lot of Lenormand decks, so I don't even know that I have one for each season, that I could associate them that way because I really don't have very many. But I picked the Memento Mori, and this is the Memento Mori Oracle by Goodchild of Black and the Moon. And the Memento Mori Oracle is a large Oracle deck. But within that deck, there is a Lenormand deck. So I have the Lenormand cards here just separated out to be read as Lenormand. Some of the titles are changed. And this deck just feels a little bit Halloween, with lots of things like bats, cemetery imagery, skeletons. It feels perfect for the season, and I also find that this almost wood grain color background feels really seasonally appropriate to me. So this will be my Lenormand deck for the fall season, the Memento Mori. And I'm slowly still working on learning Lenormand, getting more and more comfortable with it, but I do find it to be a challenging system to learn for me, but I've been enjoying it. There's lots of skulls in this deck as well, so this is a great deck, and the larger Oracle is great as well. But for now, I'm working with the Lenormand specifically. Memento Mori. The next 2 decks are the Oracle decks. So the first one is the Dreamtime reading cards by Bowen. These are the backs. And again, this is a color palette association for me. The colors in this deck feel really autumnal to me. The card I drew this morning, Spider, Connections. And I have both of Laura Bowen's Oracle decks. I also actually have this moon card as a pendant that I ordered from Laura, and I really love it so much. I love both of the decks. The Dreamtime reading cards is this one, and then the Saltwater reading cards, which is a very, very summer deck for me. But this one feels much more autumnal, and I just love both of her decks. And if you're unfamiliar with Laura Bowen's decks, check them out because both of them are wonderful. I would also say that her guidebooks are really excellent. This deck and the Saltwater Reading cards are two of the very, very few Oracle decks in my collection that when I draw a card or work with the deck in any way, I always have the guidebook on my table as well, because I always want to read the message that Laura has there. Laura Bowen is an Indigenous artist from Australia, and these are dot paintings. I hope that they're picking up well on the camera. They're really incredible. And the dots are made with different materials, predominantly feathers, I believe. And they're two of my favorite decks, but of the two, this one is definitely the fall deck. The other Oracle deck that I've chosen to put in the autumn deck pile is the Earthbound Oracle by A.L. Swartz of Skull Garden. So A.L. Swartz is the same creator who made the Wooden Tarot, which I don't have, too many eyes, and has created a Lenormand, I believe, as well, which I also don't have. Again, I only have a few Lenormands. But this was one of the first Oracle decks that I ever had. And I really like this deck. It's very much nature-based. Simple keywords. There's no guidebook. Very intuitive read. It's a deck... Oh, convenient that this card came up. It's a deck that I find is very balanced. It's not a... it's not like an affirmation kind of deck, but it's not a... incredibly heavy deck to work with either. But it's one that I really enjoy. I find that the kind of neutral color palette looks really nice alongside a lot of other decks. But again, this kind of wood grain color palette, perhaps paired with, this backing, it feels very, very autumnal to me. And I've scratched the back of that card. That's okay. So the Earthbound Oracle by A.L. Swartz is another one that I get out for fall. Next is the 4 tarot decks. And I actually have 2 Marseille decks. 2 out of 4 are Marseille decks. So the first one that I would like to show, taking out the extra cards here, is the Trionfi della Luna by Patrick Valenza. And there's a bunch of versions of this deck. I have the paradoxical, so the color reversed version in English. I wasn't, when I got this deck, particularly bothered about, which language I would get or which color version I would get. I think that they're all really cool. But it just so happened that I think that there was only a few left of the paradoxical English, so there was a bit of a sale. So that's why I picked this one. But of course, Patrick Valenza's art style is really unique, I think. And, there's a slight kind of creepiness to it. I could see how this would be a kind of like Halloween-y deck for people. But it's just a deck that I really like, and I find that the kind of brownish color palette of the paradoxical version goes really well, as an autumn deck. My deck is not shuffled very well. That needs a couple of extra shuffles, I think. But I really like Patrick Valenza's artwork so much. And I love the Deviant Moon Tarot as well. But this one has landed on the table for autumn. The Trionfi della Luna by Patrick Valenza. And this deck came with a ton of extra cards. I'm just kind of, looking now. I keep them separated and turned the other direction. There's an art card with information for the little white book there. But he included all of these are all extras. There's some ones from upcoming Oracle decks, I think, from other decks, all in the paradoxical style. I think that the lightning will be maybe in the Deviant Moon Oracle deck. We'll see. But I love Patrick Valenza's work so much. So that's Trionfi della Luna. Next tarot deck is also the Marseille deck. This one is Le Tarot Noir by Justine, Ternel, and Matthieu Hackiere. And this one is a traditional Marseille deck. These cards are huge. So just for comparison, the Trionfi della Luna is a standard tarot size. Compared to the Tarot Noir, they're massive. I think that they're fantastic. This is the back. Beautiful flower. And I love that the backs are not reversible, because with Marseille, it gives a way to show if the card is a reversal or not when you're reading, because of course some of the minors are exactly symmetrical in their imagery. So if you want to just peek, that's what I do anyway, because I read Marseille with reversals. I'll just peek at the back and see if it's an upright or reversed. I know you can also mark your cards as well, whatever you like. Again, I find this kind of antique-y color palette to feel autumnal to me. There's also just something about the artwork in this deck that's very slightly Tim Burton, very slightly, Nightmare Before Christmas feeling. Something about the faces in this deck. It's, I don't know even how to describe it, but I love this art style so much. I love the color palette. I have heard rumor that there's going to be a smaller version of this, but it's all rumor. If you know anything about that rumor and if the rumor's true and where I can get one, put it in the comments, because I would totally buy this deck again in a smaller size. This deck seems to be a bit hard to come by. I found my copy on Books, which is a kind of secondhand book website, but I found a new copy. The guidebook is quite good. It's only in French, and it fell apart after I read it once, which wasn't my favorite thing, but I love this deck. The faces in this deck are fantastic. One thing, you can't do too large of readings with this. With my tarot table, which is pretty spacious, I'm doing 3 card readings when I grab this deck, but it's a great one. For my one kind of Smith-Waite inspired deck that I have for fall out, I chose the Steampunk Tarot by Barbara Moore and Ali Fell, and this version is published by Synergy. And it has copper gilding, which goes again really well with my autumnal color palette on my tarot table. Look at that. Amazing. And I don't really know why I think of this as an autumnal deck again, other than the really deep, coppers and oranges and browns in the colors of the artwork, but also maybe it's, like many of us, I love Halloween as part of October, and there's something about steampunk dress, as a kind of costume. Theme decks are not usually, something that I'm too into, but this I really like. I like this. I read this as a queer polyamorous 3 of Cups. I choose to read it that way. This is not the most diverse deck. This is not a diverse deck at all, actually. But I do read some queer presence in this deck, which I appreciate, and I like the colors so much. So that's Steampunk Tarot by Barbara Moore and Ali Fell. Published by Synergy. So my deck is a Czech language version of the deck. So then I just got the app in order to be able to work with the guidebook, as I do not speak Czech. The last deck in my autumn pile is an animal tarot deck. And that is the Oriens Tarot by Ambisun. Check out the metallic compass on there. I really like that. This was a deck that I backed on Kickstarter quite a ways back now. And I got a cloth with it that was, I think, an add-on. I think everybody got the cloth. I'm not sure if there were other add-ons. I didn't get many. It has holographic edges, which is kind of interesting and not very autumnal in terms of my color palette, but this dark purple I really like. And this deck too has a lot of very deep colors. It's a very dark color palette overall, which I like. I can imagine it being a bit hard to see potentially, depending on your eyesight. I find it good though. I wish the cardstock was a bit thicker, but I like to have an animal deck on my table all the time, and I've had a hard time actually finding animal tarot decks that I really like. Animal oracle decks, we get along swimmingly, but animal tarot decks I struggle with because some of the associations, if it's not something that's an association that I share, if I can't see why, I understand why you would pick this animal for this card, then I tend to have a hard time, especially if my own animal associations and in the tarot deck kind of clash. Not a problem that arises with an oracle, since it's just, there's not so much of a system. But this one is one of the few that the animal choices for the cards really work for me. And certainly of the few animal tarot decks I have, this one is the most kind of fall winter feeling, with the darker palette. And it's a deck that I really enjoy working with. It looks really beautiful, I think. When I'm picking out these decks for the seasons, I've increasingly been doing readings for myself that include multiple decks, so I'm also always thinking about how the decks look beside each other. And I think that this deck, the Oriens Tarot, and this one, the Dreamtime reading cards by Bowen, these two go really, really well together as a pair in my experience. And the Dreamtime reading cards have a lot of animal presences in them as well. I love that the ants are the Three of Pentacles. This whale. Yeah, so that is the Oriens Tarot by Ambisun, and that is all of the decks that I've gotten out to work with for the autumn season for now. Again, definitely not the only ones that I will work with in the next couple of months, but these are decks that stood out in my collection as ones that feel, really kind of connecting with the seasonal energy as I'm experiencing it right now. In the place that I live, of course, depending where you are geographically and what the weather and the climate are doing, I have no doubt these associations will be very, very different in terms of if you like to pick decks seasonally and live in a different part of the world. So, yeah, those are my autumnal decks. If you have any that you would like to share, please do leave a message in the comments. Let me know what decks you like to work with in the fall, around October time here, at least in Ontario is the fall. Decks that you like to work with around Samhain, if any of these decks are on your fall deck list as well, or if there are ones that I haven't mentioned that you love, let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great night. Bye.